Oscar Brightman sauntered through the bustling halls of the Galactic Academy of Interspecies Relations, his charismatic smile drawing admiring glances from students of various species. At 45, he was in his prime, divorced, confident, and unafraid to enjoy the attention his position as a renowned professor brought him. As he approached the lecture hall, a flash of blue caught his eye. A stunningly beautiful alien woman with sapphire skin stood in the center of the hallway, her features a perfect blend of human and otherworldly. Oscar's smile widened as he approached her. "Well, hello there," he said, his voice smooth and inviting. "I don't believe we've had the pleasure. I'm Professor Oscar Brightman, and you are—" The blue-skinned woman turned, her silver-violet eyes widening in recognition. "Professor Brightman, I'm Layla, your new student from Azuria Prime. I've been so looking forward to meeting you." Oscar took her hand, bringing it to his lips for a gentle kiss. "The pleasure is all mine, Layla. I must say your beauty is quite literally out of this world." Layla's skin rippled, darkening to a rich cobalt. "Oh my, Professor. You're even more charming than the rumors suggested." Oscar chuckled, releasing her hand but maintaining eye contact. "Rumors, eh? I hope they've all been good." "Oh, very good," Layla purred, leaning in slightly. "They say you're the best teacher in the academy, in more ways than one." Before Oscar could respond, a familiar voice called out, "Dad, are you flirting with the new students again?" He turned to see his daughter, Zoe, approaching with an exasperated but amused expression. "Now, sweetheart," Oscar said with a wink, "you know I'm just being friendly." Zoe rolled her eyes. "Right. Well, try to keep the friendliness to a minimum during class, okay? Some of us are actually here to learn." As Zoe walked away, Oscar turned back to Layla with a grin. "That's my daughter. Brilliant girl, but she thinks her old man should act his age." Layla's eyes sparkled with interest. "I think you're acting perfectly. What's the human phrase? Age is just a number?" Oscar laughed, guiding Layla toward the lecture hall. "I like the way you think. Now, let's see if your mind is as quick as your wit." The class began, and Oscar found himself thoroughly enjoying the dynamic with Layla. She was sharp, asking insightful questions and offering unique perspectives. Their banter had a flirtatious edge that kept the other students engaged and amused. During a discussion on personal space, Layla asked, "So, Professor, is it true that humans use proximity to signal romantic interest?" She took a deliberate step closer to his desk. Oscar met her gaze with a challenging smirk. "Indeed it is, Layla, though the art of maintaining professional boundaries is equally important. Perhaps we could explore that topic after class." The other students exchanged knowing glances and barely suppressed giggles. Oscar noticed Zoe shaking her head in the back row, but he couldn't bring himself to care. It had been too long since he'd felt this spark of excitement. As the class ended, Layla approached his desk. "Professor Brightman, I was hoping we could discuss my research project. It's on the role of physical attraction in interspecies diplomacy." Oscar leaned back in his chair, eyeing her with interest. "Fascinating topic. I'd be happy to provide some personal insights. Dinner in my office this evening?" Layla's skin shimmered with delight. "I'd be honored, Professor, for academic purposes, of course." "Of course," Oscar agreed with a wink. As Layla sashayed away, he couldn't help but feel that this semester was going to be his most interesting yet. Zoe approached his desk, arms crossed. "Seriously, Dad? The blue girl?" Oscar shrugged, unrepentant. "What can I say? I'm expanding my horizons. Isn't that what you're always telling me to do?" Zoe sighed, but there was a hint of a smile on her face. "Just Be careful, okay? And maybe try to keep the flirting out of the classroom." Oscar laughed, throwing an arm around his daughter's shoulders as they left the hall. "No promises, sweetheart, but I'll do my best to be discreet." As they walked, Oscar found his thoughts drifting back to Layla and their upcoming research session. This semester was definitely looking up. Later that evening, Oscar's office was dimly lit, a soft glow from the holographic lamps casting a warm light. Layla arrived, her presence immediately filling the room with an alluring, otherworldly charm. She wore a flowing, iridescent dress that accentuated her sapphire skin and clung to her every curve. Her silver-violet eyes sparkled with mischief and curiosity. "Good evening, Professor," she said, her voice a melodious whisper that sent a shiver down Oscar's spine. "Good evening, Layla," Oscar replied, his tone more intimate than he intended. "Ready for our session?" Layla's lips curled into a seductive smile. "Absolutely. I've been looking forward to it all day." Oscar gestured for her to sit, but Layla remained standing, her gaze fixed on him. She took a step closer, the light playing off her shimmering skin, highlighting the elegant lines of her body. Oscar's eyes roamed over her, captivated by her beauty. Her long, iridescent hair cascaded down her back, framing a face that was both exotically alien and strikingly human. Her body was slender, yet curvaceous, with a grace that seemed almost ethereal. "So, Professor," Layla began, her tone teasing, "where do we start?" Oscar swallowed, trying to maintain his composure. "I thought we could discuss the nuances of human and Azurian interaction in a more private context." Layla raised an eyebrow, her smile widening. "A fascinating topic. And what would you like to know, Professor?" Oscar took a step closer, their bodies almost touching. "I want to understand the depth of Azurian emotions and how they compare to human feelings." Layla's eyes darkened to a deeper shade of indigo, a sign of her growing desire. "Emotions, you say? Well, we Azurians feel deeply, especially when it comes to affection and attraction." She reached out, her fingers trailing lightly over Oscar's chest, sending sparks of electricity through him. Oscar's breath hitched as he felt the cool, smooth touch of her skin against his. He placed his hand over hers, holding it gently as he looked into her eyes. "Show me," he whispered, his voice hoarse with longing. Layla's smile turned into a sultry grin. She leaned in, her lips brushing against his ear as she spoke. "With pleasure, Professor." In one swift motion, she closed the distance between them, her body pressing against his. Oscar's hands found her waist, pulling her closer as their lips met in a passionate kiss. Layla's kiss was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a tantalizing blend of warmth and coolness, of familiarity and alien mystery. Their kisses grew more fervent, more urgent. Layla's hands roamed over Oscar's body, exploring every inch with a curious, hungry touch. Oscar responded in kind, his fingers tracing the contours of her body, marveling at the smoothness of her skin and the firmness of her muscles. Layla broke the kiss, her eyes burning with desire. She pushed Oscar back onto his desk, straddling him with a graceful ease. Her dress slipped off her shoulders, revealing more of her stunning sapphire skin. Oscar's hands moved to her hips, holding her steady as she leaned down to kiss him again. The sensation was overwhelming, a perfect blend of pleasure and connection. Layla moved with a rhythmic grace, her hips rocking against his as they found their rhythm. Oscar's hands roamed over her body, exploring every inch of her exquisite form. He marveled at the softness of her skin, the firmness of her muscles, the way her body seemed to respond to his every touch. And so their evening study session went. Oscar sauntered into his office, a spring in his step and a mischievous glint in his eye. The research session with Layla the previous evening had been enlightening, to say the least. As he settled into his chair, a knock at the door interrupted his reverie. "Come in," he called, expecting to see Layla. Instead, a Venusian student with iridescent scales slithered in, looking nervous. "Professor Brightman," the student hissed, "I require assistance with human courtship rituals." Oscar raised an eyebrow. "And why, pray tell, do you need this information, Sasthor?" Sasthor's scales rippled in what Oscar recognized as embarrassment. "I wish to express interest in a human classmate. I have observed Layla's interactions with you and wish to emulate her success." Oscar choked on his coffee. "Success? I'm not sure what you mean, Sasthor. Layla and I have a purely professional relationship." The Venusian's forked tongue flicked out skeptically. "But she entered your office last night and did not emerge for hours. On Venus, such behavior indicates successful mating." "Good God," Oscar muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Sasthor, on Earth, private meetings between professors and students are for academic purposes only. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a class to prepare for." As Sasthor slithered away, looking confused, Oscar couldn't help but wonder if he'd inadvertently started some sort of interstellar incident. The lecture hall was buzzing with energy as Oscar entered. He noticed several alien students attempting to mimic human flirting behaviors with varying degrees of success. A Martian was awkwardly winking at a bemused human girl, while a gelatinous Jupiterian was trying to master the art of the hair flip, despite not having any hair. Oscar cleared his throat, calling the class to order. "Today, we'll be discussing the nuances of nonverbal communication across species. Can anyone give me an example?" Layla's hand shot up, her skin shimmering with excitement. Oscar nodded, bracing himself for whatever she might say. "In human culture," Layla began, her voice sultry, "prolonged eye contact is a sign of attraction, is it not?" She fixed Oscar with an intense stare, her pupils dilating dramatically. The class tittered as Oscar shifted uncomfortably. "That's partially correct, Layla. However, context is crucial. In a professional setting, such behavior could be considered inappropriate." Undeterred, Layla pressed on. "And what about physical contact? I've observed humans touching each other's arms during conversation. Is this also a sign of romantic interest?" She reached out, trailing her fingers along Oscar's arm. Oscar jumped back, nearly knocking over his datapad. "Layla, while your enthusiasm for learning is admirable, perhaps we should focus on less personal examples." The rest of the class devolved into chaos as other alien students began practicing their newfound knowledge of human flirting. Oscar watched in horror as a Saturnian attempted to perform what it thought was a seductive dance, its rings wobbling dangerously. "All right, that's enough," Oscar shouted, clapping his hands for attention. "Let's redirect our focus to more appropriate topics. Who can tell me about the diplomatic implications of misinterpreting nonverbal cues?" As the class settled down, Oscar couldn't help but notice Layla's disappointed expression. He made a mental note to have a serious talk with her about boundaries, preferably in a very public place. Later that day, Oscar was cornered in the faculty lounge by his ex-wife, Dr. Elena Brightman, head of the xenobiology department. "Oscar, we need to talk about your extracurricular activities," Elena said, her voice sharp. Oscar feigned innocence. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Elena." She rolled her eyes. "Don't play dumb with me. Half the alien student body thinks you're running some sort of interspecies dating seminar. Care to explain? It's a simple misunderstanding, Oscar protested. I've been giving Layla some extra tutoring, and the others seem to have gotten the wrong idea. Extra tutoring? Elena's voice dripped with skepticism. Is that what they're calling it these days? Oscar felt a headache coming on. Look, I admit things might have gotten a bit confusing, but I assure you my intentions are purely academic. Elena sighed, her expression softening slightly. Just be careful, Oscar. You're playing with fire here. These students come from vastly different cultures, and misunderstandings could have serious consequences. As if on cue, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Oscar and Elena rushed out to find a group of students engaged in what appeared to be a bizarre mating ritual. Tentacles were entwined, scales were flashing, and pheromones filled the air. In the center of it all stood Layla, looking both proud and slightly confused. "Professor Brightman," she called out when she saw him, "I've been teaching the others about human courtship rituals, just as you taught me." Oscar groaned, burying his face in his hands. Elena shot him a look that clearly said, "I told you so." "All right, everyone, break it up," Oscar shouted, wading into the fray. "This is not appropriate behavior for an academic institution." As he worked to separate the amorous aliens, Oscar caught sight of Zoe watching from the sidelines, her expression a mix of horror and amusement. "Dad," she said as he approached, "I think it's time we had a talk about the birds and the bees and the aliens." Oscar sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Sweetheart, I'm not sure I'm qualified to have that conversation anymore." Zoe patted his arm sympathetically. "Maybe not, but someone needs to do damage control before the entire academy turns into an interstellar love fest." Later that evening, Oscar sat in his office, nursing a strong cup of coffee and trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, half expecting another lovesick alien student. To his surprise, it was Layla who entered, looking uncharacteristically subdued. "Professor Brightman," she said, her voice hesitant, "I believe I owe you an apology." Oscar leaned back in his chair, eyeing her warily. "Oh? And what brought about this change of heart?" Layla's skin rippled with what Oscar now recognized as embarrassment. "I've been doing some additional research on human social norms. It seems I may have misinterpreted some of our interactions." Oscar couldn't help but chuckle. "That's putting it mildly, Layla, though I suppose I'm not entirely blameless in this situation." She perched on the edge of his desk, her expression earnest. "I truly did come here to learn, Professor. My methods may have been unorthodox, but my intentions were sincere." Oscar sighed, feeling a mix of relief and disappointment. "I believe you, Layla, and I appreciate your honesty. Perhaps we can start fresh with a more professional approach to your studies." Layla nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "I'd like that, Professor, though I must admit I'll miss our more colorful interactions." As she turned to leave, Oscar called out, "Layla?" She paused at the door, looking back at him. "For what it's worth, you're one hell of a student. Just maybe tone down the seduction techniques in class, all right?" Layla's laughter, like tinkling bells, echoed through the office as she left. Oscar shook his head, a rueful smile on his face. This semester was certainly shaping up to be one for the history books, assuming the academy survived it. As he packed up his things for the night, Oscar couldn't help but wonder what other intergalactic misunderstandings awaited him. One thing was certain. Teaching at the Galactic Academy of Interspecies Relations was never going to be boring again. Oscar fidgeted with his bow tie, surveying the grand hall of the Intergalactic Symposium on Interspecies Relations. Delegates from across the galaxy milled about, a cacophony of languages and pheromones filling the air. He spotted Layla across the room, her blue skin shimmering under the holographic chandeliers. Their eyes met, and Oscar felt a familiar flutter in his chest. "Dad, you're staring," Zoe's voice cut through his reverie. "I thought you two were keeping things professional now." Oscar cleared his throat. "We are, sweetheart. I'm just admiring her presentation outfit. Very diplomatic." Zoe rolled her eyes. "Right. And I'm sure the fact that it hugs every curve of her alien physique has nothing to do with it." Before Oscar could retort, a booming voice announced the start of the presentations. He took his seat, trying to focus on anything but the way Layla's hips swayed as she approached the podium. "Esteemed delegates," Layla began, her voice clear and confident. "Today, I present my research on Earth's romantic traditions and their potential applications in interspecies diplomacy." Oscar leaned forward, intrigued. He'd been deliberately avoiding discussions about her project, wanting to maintain some semblance of professionalism. Now, he found himself curious and a little apprehensive about what she'd discovered. As Layla launched into her presentation, Oscar's eyes widened. She was describing, in vivid detail, every interaction they'd had over the semester, from their first flirtatious encounter to their more recent, restrained interactions. The human male's initial receptiveness to physical contact suggested a mutual attraction, Layla explained, a holographic image of Oscar's office materializing behind her. However, his subsequent withdrawal indicated a complex interplay of personal desire and professional ethics. Oscar sank lower in his seat, acutely aware of the curious glances being thrown his way. He caught sight of Elena a few rows ahead, her shoulders shaking with barely suppressed laughter. Layla continued, oblivious to Oscar's discomfort. The subject's use of humor and innuendo served as a defense mechanism, allowing him to engage in flirtatious behavior while maintaining plausible deniability. A ripple of amusement went through the audience. Oscar heard a Martian delegate whisper, "Is this a scientific presentation or a soap opera?" As Layla delved deeper into her analysis, Oscar found himself reliving every moment of their interactions, the playful banter, the lingering glances, the electric tension that seemed to crackle between them. He'd been so focused on maintaining boundaries that he'd failed to recognize the depth of his own feelings. Oscar stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The entire hall fell silent, all eyes turning to him. "Layla," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "I think it's time we conducted a practical demonstration of interspecies communication." He strode towards the podium, ignoring the murmurs of the delegates. As he reached Layla, he took her hands in his, marveling at the contrast of her blue skin against his. "I've been an idiot," Oscar said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "I've been so caught up in trying to be professional that I missed what was right in front of me. You're brilliant, beautiful, and you challenge me in ways I never expected. I don't care if you're blue or green or covered in tentacles. I'm in love with you, Layla." A collective gasp went up from the audience. Layla's skin rippled, deepening to a rich indigo that Oscar now recognized as a sign of intense emotion. "Oscar," she breathed, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I thought my feelings were unrequited. I've been trying so hard to understand human love, but I never expected to experience it myself." Oscar cupped her face gently, a mischievous grin spreading across his lips. "Well, Layla, I think it's time for some hands-on learning. Care to engage in a cross-cultural exchange of affection? Layla's laughter rang out, clear and joyous. I thought you'd never ask, Professor Brightman. As their lips met, the hall erupted in a cacophony of cheers, whistles, and what might have been mating calls from some of the more exotic species. Oscar barely noticed, lost in the sensation of Layla's cool lips against his, the taste of her alien yet tantalizingly familiar. When they finally broke apart, Oscar became aware of the chaos around them. Delegates were on their feet, some applauding, others engaged in heated debates about the implications of their union. He caught sight of Zoe, who was alternating between looking mortified and grudgingly impressed. Well, Oscar said, still holding Layla close, I'd say that was a successful demonstration of interspecies relations, wouldn't you? Layla grinned, her skin pulsing with patterns of joy. Indeed, Professor, though I believe further study is required. For academic purposes, of course. Of course, Oscar agreed, winking. I propose a private research session. Say, dinner at my place tonight? As they made their way off the stage, hand in hand, they were accosted by a flurry of questions from excited delegates. Professor Brightman, is this the beginning of a new era in human-alien relations? Layla of Azuria, will your union lead to genetic experiments? Is this legal under Earth law? What about intergalactic treaties? Oscar held up his hands, trying to stem the tide of inquiries. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of indeterminate gender, please. This is a personal matter between myself and Layla. We're not looking to start an intergalactic incident. Too late for that, Dad, Zoe said, elbowing her way through the crowd. She fixed Oscar with a stern look, though he could see the hint of a smile tugging at her lips. You do realize you've just turned yourself into the poster boy for interspecies romance, right? Oscar groaned, running a hand through his hair. Well, it's not exactly how I plan to spend my sabbatical, but I suppose there are worse fates. Layla squeezed his hand reassuringly. Look on the bright side, Oscar. We've just opened up an entirely new field of study. Think of the research opportunities. As they made their way out of the hall, dodging reporters and overly curious aliens, Oscar couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. He'd come to the Galactic Academy to teach, and instead, he'd learned the most important lesson of all. Love truly was universal. 6 months later, Oscar and Layla sat across from each other at a trendy fusion restaurant, celebrating their first official date as a recognized interspecies couple. The table was a comical mix of Earth delicacies and Azurian cuisine, with chopsticks alongside what looked suspiciously like tentacle tongs. You know, Oscar said, attempting to navigate a wriggling Azurian delicacy onto his plate, when I signed up to teach at the academy, I never imagined I'd end up here. Layla smiled, her skin shimmering with amusement. Oh? And where exactly did you imagine you'd end up, Professor Brightman? Oscar grinned, reaching across the table to take her hand. Certainly not on a date with the most beautiful alien in the galaxy, trying to eat something that's still moving. As they laughed and talked, Oscar marveled at how natural it all felt. Sure, they still had their share of cultural misunderstandings, like the time Layla had tried to celebrate their 1-month anniversary by molting, a sacred Azurian tradition, but they were learning, adapting, and growing together. Their relationship had indeed become a case study in interspecies diplomacy, with academics and politicians alike clamoring for interviews and insights. But for Oscar and Layla, it was simply love, complex, challenging, and utterly worth it. As the evening drew to a close, Oscar raised his glass in a toast. To us, he said, his eyes twinkling. May our love continue to boldly go where no man or woman or alien has gone before. Layla clinked her glass against his, her laughter ringing out like music. "Oh, Oscar," she purred, her skin deepening to that enticing shade of indigo. "I believe that calls for some more hands-on research. What do you say we skip dessert and head back to your place for a private lecture on Azurian mating rituals?" Oscar grinned, already signaling for the check. "Lead the way, Layla. I'm always eager to expand my intergalactic knowledge." As they left the restaurant hand in hand, Oscar couldn't help but feel that he'd stumbled upon the greatest adventure of his life. Who knew that true love could be found in the stars? For Oscar Brightman, the Galactic Academy of Interspecies Relations had become more than just a workplace. It had become the starting point of an epic cosmic romance. Thank you for lending your ears to this light-hearted and whimsical tale. We appreciate your time and your willingness to embrace the charming absurdity of it all. Remember, love knows no bounds, even among the stars. Until next time, keep your hearts open and your imagination soaring. Cheers!